Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome back to Development Hell Podcast. Alex is here, Matt is here, and this is our 9th episode of doing this. And we're going to be doing things a little bit differently today. There's no lists. What our main topic is, we're going to be talking about what is cinema and how do you define cinema? And we have some thoughts, which is why we're going to talk about it, because I would hope that we wouldn't go into this without having some thoughts. Probably be a very boring talk. So, but before we get into that, we have some films coming out, especially for Christmas, because, all the studios are like, keep pushing movies back. Oh, crap. If we want this out in 2020, it's Christmas. So we have quite a few films coming out just in time for Christmas. But I guess we're going to get started with that, which basically December has been the month of Netflix. So Netflix has had a lot of films coming out, and their last big one is The Midnight Sky, which is a new sci-fi film directed and starring George Clooney, who plays a scientist in the Arctic trying to communicate with a spaceship with the astronauts on there before they come back to a global catastrophe. So with that idea, the talent behind it, I believe Felicity Jones and David Oyelowo are the two astronauts in it. So Alex, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to green light it because I don't know if you've heard of a YouTuber named I Am That Robbie. He's an Australian guy, young Australian guy who makes really good video essays. And he did one on, I think he called it the lonely spaceman genre of movies.
Okay.
And one of the movies he mentioned was Solaris with George Clooney, which came out, I think, in the early 2000s.
2002, I think it was from Steven Soderbergh.
Yeah, you got it. You're right on the money. He also mentioned Ad Astra, First Man,
Okay.
and then I forget the other one, but
was it The Martian?
Interstellar.
Interstellar.
Interstellar. Yeah, The Martian could have been on there too, but yeah, the lonely spaceman genre, and so that kind of piques my interest in it. Yeah, so I'm going to give that one a green light.
Okay. How about you, Matt?
I'll give it the middle one. Like don't send it back, but I don't know if I would jump for it. I don't know. I guess the premise isn't all that interesting to me specifically. I guess just story wise, but it might be interesting. So like I'll let you guys go first, and then tell me whether or not I should spend $10. And when I say $10, I probably mean like 20 or something like that.
Well, it's a Netflix original film coming out on Netflix.
Oh, okay, it's Netflix. Okay, good.
Yeah. So it's coming out
that
on
might
the
make
23rd.
it a little more green.
Yep. Oh yeah, I have somebody else's account, so I'm good.
Right on. Cool.
So
those movies are hit or miss. They could be really, really good, or they could just be like Ad Astra wasn't for me. I don't know. I just, it didn't work for me.
I'm the only one here that absolutely loved that film.
Wow.
And I loved it even more the second time I watched it. And it's interesting, and it's just interesting that you brought up like that idea of like the lonely spaceman kind of film. And what's interesting, Solaris is a remake of an Andrei Tarkovsky film from the early 70s. And I actually just watched that last weekend for the Filmstagram Movie Club. I have it. I've watched it probably 5 or 6 times over the course of since college. And they obviously can range a lot, because that one's a lot less sci-fi-y, and like Ad Astra feels like Heart of Darkness in space. That's basically what it is. And because like it's, or for those that don't know the book, it's Apocalypse Now in space.
Like the Marlon Brando, but it's Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Sure. Yeah.
But I know the reviews are iffy right now for The Midnight Sky, but I'm still greenlighting it because like I still have hope for George Clooney as a director, because he's made some great films, but he's also made some misfires. And like Suburbicon was one of the most disappointing movies for me personally in the past like 5 years, because like I wanted that to be so great. but
Yeah.
I love sci-fi. So basically, sci-fi is going to get my interest anyway. And it's also nice seeing George Clooney acting again because he hasn't been in a film since I believe Money Monster in like 2016 at this point. So it has my attention, so I'm going to green light it. I'm interested.
Right on.
So the next one we have is News of the World, and Tom Hanks is in a Western directed by Paul Greengrass. So this is their second collaboration after Captain Phillips. And it's about a man who goes through the frontier delivering news, and he winds up becoming the charge of a young child trying to get him to his family across the frontier. And it's about the relationship that they build. So, Alex, the News of the World pique your interest?
The only reason I'm going to greenlight, has Tom Hanks ever done a Western?
I don't think he has, and that also piqued my interest too.
That's what makes it like, wow, because most of his characters are so, I always think about him and Denzel Washington because they both, when they release a movie, there's always something consistent about most of their characters. Even if Denzel plays like a bad guy, there's a moral thing there for him. And with Tom Hanks, there's always this sense of morality that he carries with him throughout all of his characters, especially as he got into the 90s. So seeing him in a Western with that, I think will be really interesting.
So just to clarify as well, this one's actually in theaters. So you do have to spend money to go out to a theater to go see this one before I got to Matt, just to give him a heads up. So we got, I have to spend money. Nope. Matt, what do you think?
So when did Tom Hanks last year get the Cecil B. DeMille Award? Was that him? When did he get? I know he got like some kind of lifetime achievement thing recently. I thought he's like, I'm thinking anyway. Was that
Wasn't
him?
it?
That's someone else. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But no, maybe that was a couple years ago. I don't know. But either way,
I do recall.
How old is? Yeah, like how old is this guy? Because it's interesting that his filmography is like really, really good. Like I think Alex, you brought up Christopher Walken, who's been in many movies, but many of them I would stay away from personally. But like, I don't know why he chooses those things.
Money.
Tom Hanks, yeah, money. Like Tom Hanks, he is like a bona fide movie star, and like when he puts out something, there's definitely a draw just based on his name alone. Like I remember, I think this year or last year, I think he made something for Apple TV. What was that movie? Does anybody know?
Greyhound.
Great. Okay, there we go. Yeah, because of him, I didn't because LOL. But I considered getting I was like, maybe I should get it just for that movie. I usually don't do that for people or for like one particular thing. Like I won't like venture into like spending a bunch of cash just because I want to see it one like outing, like cinematic outing. He's really awesome. I follow him sort of kind of anywhere. I saw Saving Private Ryan randomly, I think like a month ago, and I was like, "Whoa, this is awesome!" So I'm happy about this movie. Yeah, greenlight it. Why not?
Okay, I'm greenlighting it too. I'm pretty excited because I didn't love Captain Phillips. There were some things about it that I didn't like, and like I thought it was an interesting choice having a non-actor playing that particular character. And like he got nominated for an Academy Award,
right.
And this might be a hot take, but like I thought he was pretty bad in it, and I'm just like, but like Tom Hanks was great, and like I love westerns, so Tom Hanks in a western, you could just say that you got me, and like this is playing at the Navy Yard Drive-In for the Philadelphia Film Society. So I'm hoping to see it next weekend after Christmas. So we'll see how it is. Now, this one was just randomly dropped within the past couple of weeks to release on Christmas is a new Pinocchio. And it is a new Italian film, Pinocchio. Also starring Roberto Benigni. Except this time, he's Geppetto.
Oh.
And not Pinocchio. So, and this is from director Matteo Garrone. And I'm trying to see if I know. Oh, he did. I don't know if either of you saw a film called Tale of Tales with John C. Reilly and Salma Hayek. It was an interesting, like, medieval fantasy film. It's weird. And like,
one of those people is really attractive, and one of those people isn't.
I was waiting for the joke. One of those is very attractive, and the other one is Salma Hayek.
That's what I should have said.
I was waiting for that. But so we have a new Pinocchio, and just from the stills, it looks weird, which I guess it should because it's Pinocchio. But what are your thoughts, Alex?
I'm not gonna, I don't want to give it a red light, but I'm not gonna green light it right away. That's not something that I'd probably pass over that. So,
how about you, Matt?
Yeah, it's not for me. There's too many strings on me. Too many strings on me.
So I'm waiting for.
Did you say there's too many strings on that puppet?
No, too many strings on me. Which I guess we're all puppets in a weird way. I don't know.
So that's a topic of our next podcast. And actually, my favorite Pinocchio adaptation is Age of Ultron. Because
oh yeah, everyone freaked out at the trailer.
I'm waiting for Tom Hanks's new Pinocchio from Disney, where he plays Geppetto.
Why? Wait, okay. What's with the Pinocchio craze?
Because it's free. The story's so old, you don't need to pay money for the rights to it. Okay. So that's why we keep getting King Arthur. So, because money, that's why. And also, what's going to stop Disney from making even more remakes of all their other stuff? They just announced 66, I think, new projects the other week during their investors meeting, which we could have a whole entire show just talking about all the new shit that they're going to be releasing. So, but speaking of Disney, because we have Pixar's Soul coming out on Disney Plus on Christmas Day. And I keep typing in the wrong letters. There we go. So this is starring Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey. And it's about a musician who has lost his passion for music, is transported out of his body, and must find his way back with the help of an infant soul learning about herself. So I've seen a lot of like comparisons to Inside Out, like that kind of feel to it. And this also seems like the first ever like fully like film that like Disney is really like Pixar is really bringing out like Black culture into it, which I saw a really interesting documentary series that they have on Disney Plus right now about Pixar. And one of the episodes was just purely about them wanting to make a barbershop scene for this film because it was such an important thing to show like Jamie Foxx's character. He has a big gig. He needs to go get a haircut, which some of us can relate to, because if you look at me, I could probably use one. But Alex, are you going to greenlight Soul?
I think I have to greenlight that. Being a musician, it sounds very relatable. So I've got to greenlight that. It sounds, and Inside Out was on my list for animated movies. Mm-hmm. And so it sounds really touching. And I bet you that a lot of musicians right now, not just because of COVID-19, but because of the way the music industry has gone, not too dissimilar from the movie industry. I'm sure a lot of musicians and songwriters it's going to be up their alley,
How about you, Matt?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good movie. I think because the representation piece, so that makes it kind of like important, I guess, especially if you're kind of like a Pixar fan. Like I feel like there's a couple of movies that they've made that are kind of skippable, but this definitely wouldn't be one of them. Like you can tell just by the trailer alone, by like the music or the premise, which I'm interested in because how they portray afterlife, but in a kids movie. Like Inside Out was interesting because it had to be deep enough to make sense, but then simple enough that it was like accessible, and then also be colorful enough to like, you know, I guess keep like little kids, I guess, interested. So like this movie has to do that same thing, and that's like a challenge because like just one of those things could like go wrong, and then it's kind of just like, oh, like whatever. Like if it's not colorful enough, then kids won't like it. If it's too cerebral, then it's kind of like, who's going to watch this except for, I don't know, Shane. So this is interesting. Yeah, I totally think like that.
They need to make a Chinatown reference sometime in it to make sure that all the adults can connect to it. So I'm 100% greenlighting this. I've been excited for this. I'm not gonna lie, a lot of the new Pixar films haven't really popped up on my radar, or the Disney animation ones throughout this year. And then I saw the trailer for Soul, and I'm like, sold. And then I saw that documentary on Disney Plus, and I'm like, I have to see this movie. Like it became that much of like, must watch this on Christmas when it comes out on Disney Plus. Speaking of streaming releases, kind of, on Christmas, we have Wonder Woman 1984, which is releasing in theaters and HBO Max on Christmas. And it'll be on HBO Max for 30 days. And then will only be in theaters until its theatrical run is over, which we could also have a whole entire conversation about what Warner Brothers did with HBO Max in 2021, but we'll save that for a different conversation. We actually might bring it up today because I think it might be a little relevant. But so Wonder Woman 1984 is the sequel to Wonder Woman. Patty Jenkins is back and Gal Gadot's back as Wonder Woman. And the basic premise is Wonder Woman, Diana, finds this stone that allows you to fulfill a wish, but it takes something from you in exchange. And what it winds up giving and taking between Diana, her new friend, played by Kristen Wiig, who's supposed to be Cheetah, and Pedro Pascal, who's playing Maxwell Lord, who's basically a Trump-esque con artist, who's a Ponzi schemer. He looks he's supposed to look like Donald Trump. It's pretty obvious. Who's a Ponzi schemer on infomercials, and what he is able to wish for, and the whole entire world is in the balance because of it. So, Alex, does this pique your interest?
Now that you gave me the description and what you explaining the characters, and I love Kristen Wiig. I think she's like the funniest person alive, one of them anyway. I think I'm gonna greenlight it. I wasn't crazy about the first one. I heard people. I think I watched the whole thing, and I just wasn't crazy about it. But yeah, I'll greenlight that. That would just be fun. Sounds like a fun time at the movies.
How about you, Matt?
Yeah. So every once in a while, I'm kind of just like, I don't really feel like waiting, so I'll just like spoil it for myself and kind of like read about like what actually happens in the movie. So Alex, maybe you should watch this because it's actually like they intentionally tried to do something different. Mostly because a lot of people didn't like the ending because like because people, I don't know if this is how you felt, but I felt that first Wonder Woman, it was kind of like leading up towards something and meeting something, and then something happens with a certain character, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, so we're not doing that. Okay, I thought we were gonna do something different. Oh, okay, well, whatever. Like this movie, it seems like they're trying to do something different than that. They're not gonna have like the conventional kind of like whatever, the conventional beats. So yeah, green light, definitely the green light. How did you guys feel about the ending, by the way, of the first movie?
What's that?
How did you guys feel about the ending of the first movie?
You're speaking about the Chris Pine character, right? Was it Chris
No,
Pine?
I was thinking the Ares.
Ares. Yeah,
Yeah.
I loved a lot of aspects of the first film, but I hated the antagonists in it. Because like Danny Houston's character was a cartoon, like a walking cartoon, and had no depth to him. He's like evil Nazi, except it's not a Nazi because it's World War One. And then what they wound up doing with Ares and it turning into a giant PS2 like action sequence, because that's what the special effects look like, honestly. And I'm just like, ugh. So I was really disappointed with that. And it kind of dropped the film because like I was loving it. And then I'm like, ugh. At the end, it didn't really stick the landing for me.
Well, yeah, because I thought the ending was kind of leading towards like there's evil in people, but like you have like the choice and stuff like that to, I don't know, to go in a direction to go like this way or that way, and then maybe you might need just like role models to kind of like help push you towards like doing good instead of it just being kind of like, well, there's people and there's this this evil entity and they just control people to be dicks. And I was like, oh, okay, well, oh, well, that's a lot less whatever. So I can be a jerk. I can cut people off in traffic, and then like, well, it's not me. Aries maybe do it. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's bad. Yeah.
It was potentially more compelling, and then they simplified it to put it as like there's this one villain doing all of this bad for humanity, so let's
Well,
have a fist fight.
there are a lot of examples of comic book movies where the second one, far exceeded the first one in terms of money and in quality. So this might be another example. This could be another example of that. And X-Men, Spider-Man, the original
Which
Spider-Man trilogy.
I'm greenlighting Wonder Woman 1984. I'm interested because like obviously there's going to be a fight with her and Cheetah. Like it has to happen, and they showed it in the trailers. So like you're going to get that physical fight. I'm interested to see what they do when the main antagonist has no power, like manifested powers for her to fight. And he's more of just, and like that's interesting because it's like there's good ways and bad ways to handle that kind of thing, because like what if your antagonist's powers are uncinematic? How do you deal with that? Because like look, you have a giant psychic fight at the end of a comic book movie. So we have one more film to talk about, and this is an independent film that's been pushed back throughout this year, and it's Promising Young Woman. And Carey Mulligan plays a woman who pretends to be intoxicated and then has creepy dudes take her home while she's very obviously not able to consent, but she actually can. And she does horrible things to them to punish them. So, does this sound like your kind of film, Alex?
Man, it depends on the trajectory of the, it almost has the sense of like, if you do a revenge movie, and the reason why the kills have meaning, that's why Kill Bill is so good. Some people don't like it. I think we all agree it's pretty damn good. But it depends on the depth. It depends on the sympathy and the empathy that's kind of weaved within the different, what she does. I'm assuming she's a serial killer. She ends up kind of killing them, or
that's a good question. And that's interesting because I really didn't think about like would she be categorized as a serial killer depending on what she does to them. But
because I just because Carey Mulligan is awesome. She's wonderful. But I worry. I guess I'm going to give you a yellow light because I worry that it's just straight up like, I hope it's not just man-hating movie material. I think that's why I was like, uh-oh, when I saw the trailers. I hope that's not what this is.
How about you, Matt?
Man hating.
What?
It is a man hate. I don't know why that made me laugh. But you're right? Because so the moment that changed, I've never heard of this movie before, but like the moment he said that, I immediately thought, I wonder how Twitter's gonna think. Because that movie, what Shane just described sounds very, and maybe even it's on purpose, but it's very like provoking. Like what she's doing, what's happening to her, what that is saying about society. Yeah, like the trajectory of how everything is kind of like, I guess, like set up and played out. That could be either a really interesting story, or that could be somebody could get canceled or something over it. I recommend a movie called Hard Candy, starring Ellen Page and Patrick Wilson.
Yeah.
That movie is one of like the best movies I've ever. We have to do like a top, I guess, like part 2 of our favorite movies of all time. But that movie's kind of like that. It's about something else though. It's more about like kids and having to go through compromised situations, and then being vigilantism in that. And then also, so that's a good movie. And then Under the Skin. Under the Skin reminds me of your movie, which you just said reminds me of Under the Skin. It's kind of like, hey, like watch out, because she's pretty doesn't mean that, you know, whatever. Oh, now you're dead.
Like that movie is weird.
Yeah.
Now, I've been super excited about this film because I think it's a really important and topical theme to tackle. So I think it's worth tackling. I'm very interested to see how they tackle it. And obviously, I think that's the big question, because trust me, it's like, heard it plenty of times, like, you're going to ruin this young man's life who has all this promise by saying he raped you. And it's very interesting taking this on, and I'm interested to see where it goes with it. One thing I am certain of is that it's going to be controversial, and also Carey Mulligan's going to be great in it. So I'm interested to see, because this was one of those big indie films that got pushed back because of all of this, and some of them have started to trickle in because this, The Climb, which did get released in theaters, I still want to see it. Like French Dispatch, Wes Anderson's new film, got pushed into 2021. A24 has films like Saint Maud and The Green Knight that I really want to see. So I'm glad some of these movies are popping up. Very interesting that they're releasing this as counter programming for Christmas time. Because like the rest of these films that are coming out on Christmas are either like big awards contenders like News of the World, or it's like a big superhero movie like Wonder Woman, or it's Soul, which is a really big family-friendly film to enjoy. So like this is interesting that something this edgy is coming out on Christmas, but we're going to find out. But those are all the main films. Like one little one that I was just going to throw out there, Robert Rodriguez has a new film coming out on Netflix on Christmas, and it's basically a spiritual successor to Shark Boy and Lava Girl. Like actually. And and it's about like superheroes and young kids being trained to be superheroes, and it looks like this was made by the same guy who made Shark Boy, Lava Girl, and Spy Kids. So I'm like, that's interesting. So it's going to be some interesting films to see on Christmas. So what is cinema? And I feel like a very interesting place to start with this is because one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, Martin Scorsese, was quoted in trying to define what cinema is and what isn't cinema. And obviously, it was a very topical comment because he was making it about superhero movies, comic book movies. And it's very interesting because, like, this is one of the most amazing filmmakers in the history of cinema, and you can't take anything away from that. And I guess, at least with that as a kind of springboarding point, Alex, what are your thoughts on his specific comment about like superhero movies, comic book movies not being cinema?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's so funny, going off what you said. I mean, this man has had like 3 film careers in one. If you look at like all the breadth of all the films and the types of films that he's had, I don't know, maybe more. In fact, I was just watching, he has a bunch of shorts that they remastered and they put on YouTube. I've been watching a lot of shorts lately, really getting into short films. And he has a lot of stuff he did back in the 70s, when he was still kind of like finding his voice. And so that's another career that he said. This guy he's done so much in film and for film. And so when he made this comment, I know it rubbed people the wrong way, and some people probably agreed with it. I have a long answer for you. I'll try not to be too long, but I remember when I was still working at Rider University, I think, or maybe it was before that, I was drinking coffee and having a bagel inside a bagel shop not too far from campus. And I was reading, maybe it was the Asbury Park Press, and it was their art section. And they were talking about the movie business and how the big studios had decided to go from like doing like 10, 11, 12 movies that year to just doing like 6 movies. And 4 of them were going to be massive budget movies. And the other 2 were going to be kind of like middle of the line budget movies, maybe 10 million to 20 to 30 million dollars. Everything else was going to be 75, 100 million or more. And I remember going, that's it. That this is the beginning of I don't want to say I thought it was the beginning of the end, but I thought it was going to, be like, you weren't going to see a lot of, great cinema coming from those big studios. And it was going to be, and in the movie houses, in the theaters, you were going to see really big budget franchise movies. And that's really what that article was about. It's about franchise movies that the studios realized they were going to get money. And look, from a business standpoint, they're right. That quote that correct me if I'm wrong, the Marvel movies aren't cinema, I think is exactly what he said, right?
Their theme park rides or something, right?
Their theme park rides. That's right. Man, I kind of love that he said it, because he's not 100%. He's not altogether wrong. The thing is, he came up at a time when directors and filmmakers, the whole thing was about this form of self-expression, that your movies were expressing something personal, social, political, but that the filmmakers were expressing something very personal through their cinema. The same way that bands and that artists, musical artists, are expressing something very personal through an album, And if you look at his movies, there is something very personal in everything he does, especially Martin Scorsese's faith-based movies. What I think, the thing with Marvel movies not being cinema, I think that to be honest with you, what we should say is that some of these comic book films are actually imitating cinema that we've seen before. And we're even starting to see comic book films start to play around with genre. I mean, we've been seeing that for years. The best example being the Joker. The Joker, ironically, in the same year that he says this, in King of Comedy, those two, Todd Phillips, the director, even said that those 2 movies were an influence. And so, but I'm seeing, when I watch Captain America Civil War, I'm thinking, oh, this is kind of like espionage drama, and I never saw Winter Soldier, but I remember, I think it was Shane, you guys described it. It's an espionage film with Captain America in it.
It was very heavily influenced by like 3 Days of the Condor, and like they even got Robert Redford to star in it.
Yeah.
because Robert Redford was one of the government people in Winter Soldier.
Right. So and I said, and thank you. I've never seen Winter Soldier, but I've been seeing this and going to the movies and going, oh, okay, so they are basically imitating cinema. I mean, we've had remakes since the beginning of silent films. There have been remakes of movies, and we've had movies being influenced by other movies. So that aspect that it's imitating or using genre and imitating movies that we've seen before, it doesn't mean that it's not cinema, but it does what I think, the way I interpret the things that he was saying was that the self-expression is potentially being lost in the movie making business, because when there's the next Avengers movie coming out, is something personal being expressed, about what's going on in society and what's going on socially and politically, and how that's affecting us as human beings. Is that happening, in our cinema? I really think that's the bigger conversation. Now, I could be wrong. He might have just flat out said, we can't make the movies we want anymore unless they cost, $100 million. And that sucks. And I'm mad about it. And I'm Martin Scorsese and I can say what I want. But I think that's really what he should have said, was that he should have, instead of making a statement, he should have asked the question, are these movies conveying a personal message? Are they getting us to look inward and outward? Because that's what cinema is. It's the introverts and the extroverts can sit at the same table and go and look in and then look out. And we can look at all the things that go into it. So that's my kind of interpretation of that. Is Scorsese should have asked the question. You should have, like, are these expressing something?
And I guess, like, before I say anything, I'm gonna let Matt bring up his thoughts on this.
Okay, yeah. So I definitely like what happened with Joker, in the sense that movie, it took Taxi Driver, which, when I watch it anyway, there's a lot of conversation that somebody could have on society, and then you don't have to stretch too much to kind of delve into mental health or mental illness, but that's not so much the main thing that's going on in there. But with Joker, that's definitely the case. And I think that, for me, A, because that's my job, but then B, because I don't know, I just really liked it. I liked that twist, because it's not so much pointing a finger or holding a mirror up to society, which is important, but for me, Joker kind of shows what happens afterwards. So it's not just hey, this stuff is going on, you should pay attention to it. It's kind of you should pay attention to it, because not just because it's bad, but it's happening. It can happen to you. It can happen everywhere and anywhere. So I really like Joker because of that. I think when I heard that he made that quote, and I don't think that he was trying to be a villain or a jerk when he said that, but I think when I heard that, it made me think about it's random comment sections when people say oh yeah, so this is a movie and this is a film, this is meant for kids, or even this is meant for kids, or this is animated, so that shouldn't have as much respect as this other thing, which is about something, or it's serious and there's not explosions. But there's you can definitely get poignant or beautiful or disturbing or relatable things with kind of from anything, honestly. I remember the first time I saw the movie Predator, I was wow, this movie is really, really good. And not just because of explosions, this movie is just really, really good. So with comic book movies, or just what is cinema, I think that's kind of I think that comment is so subjective, and it's so kind of it's almost like very black and white, you know what I mean? And to kind of say like only like something can only be one thing instead of multiple things, or what you got out of the movie is what everyone else has to get out of that movie. Like that I have a problem with. I have to disagree. Like or like what that movie meant to the filmmaker. Like so even in that sense, if you're expressing something, like I can get as much of like a tearjerk moment from Avengers Endgame as I could from, I don't know, like what's like a good Scorsese moment? I don't know, like the ending of The Aviator, like the way of the future, and it's just like wow, like that's powerful. Like I don't know, there's like a lot of interesting things. I think someone kind of take this conversation, but I think for me, when I hear stuff like that, it's kind of like, yeah, but that's just your opinion, man.
Well, that's like your opinion, man.
Right. Oh, Matt, you froze like right. Did you freeze right after you said that?
Yeah.
That's funny. It's funny that you froze right when you said that.
Well, I'm going to pick up from where Matt was talking about then, since unfortunately he is frozen. I have very strong feelings about this, and like my first reaction was that his comments were elitist. And it's Matt's bad.
I was like doing like this.
My biggest issue with it is I don't think any single person can define what cinema is. And like, even if you're Martin Scorsese and you're one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, I don't think you can say another film isn't cinema or not. And to write off something as just, well, it's just an amusement park, I'm like, that doesn't make it not cinema or a film. And especially from my perspective, someone who's seen like 440 films of just 2020, I've seen everything. And every single one of those films are a film and make up cinema. And I feel like this is like a bigger conversation about even genre. Because like Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, who's like his biggest supporter after those comments, who like doubled down on everything that Scorsese said, they're known for making very, like, they're human dramas. Like obviously Scorsese makes a lot of films that have like mobsters and stuff like that in it, but they're very human. I think there's a long history of, you look at science fiction, you look at Western, you look at horror, you look at fantasy, and they're just not on the same level because they're packaged differently. And because naturally, superhero movies are all genre films. Because the thing is, like, it's either fantasy or science fiction to explain how somebody is super in some way. And I watch Captain America Civil War, and that challenges me and my own personal beliefs, because it takes on the idea of, should we do the right thing, or should we have to have a government tell us if we're doing the right thing or not? And what I love so much about the Captain America films is he starts off as somebody who is like, he's a soldier. He wants to fight for his country. And throughout his arc, he is challenged on, do I blindly support my country when I know they're doing evil? And that hits home to me. And what's crazy is watching like Avengers Infinity War right now, because one of the biggest ideas in that film was, do they sacrifice one person? Should that one person die to save other people? And do we have the right to make that decision? And I think that's extremely relevant right now, because I've heard plenty of people say, let the old people die to save our economy and to let all the rest of us live our lives during this pandemic. And that's an idea that's talked about in a comic book movie.
Sure.
And I feel like Scorsese probably hasn't even given them a chance and probably hasn't even watched them and probably doesn't even know what kind of layers are there. And it's interesting because, like, you bring up Joker, which Joker is like the story in the movie Joker is just a rehash of Taxi Driver combined with King of Comedy and like smash them together. And they make it even more obvious that the fact that they hired Robert De Niro to be in the movie, to be the Jerry Lewis to himself from King of Comedy.
Yeah.
And like I even brought up we brought up Winter Soldier had Robert Redford in it as probably like an homage to the fact that this was very heavily influenced by thrillers from the 70s. And it's interesting because like Tarantino does the same stuff. There's a reason that he hired Pam Grier to be in Jackie Brown.
Right.
And it's like, and Quentin Tarantino is probably the most like pop culture influenced filmmaker out there because like his films are just full of pop culture.
Very few
and I love them.
And say that his films are films. I mean, his films are for a lot of people a launching point for cinema experience.
And like, I guess my feeling is all films are cinema. It's just some choose not to be focusing as deeply as others are. And I'm not going to sit here and argue that most comic book movies are as deep as, say, like Silence or The Last Temptation of Christ or plenty of other films, because they're not. But to say that they're just theme parks and don't have anything to say, I think is a little ignorant and shows that he doesn't even watch them. And I've seen him in, like, he doesn't watch comic book movies. And probably he's pissed off because that exact reason you brought up, Alex, is because the nature of how successful they are and remakes and franchises. I'm not going to argue that they have drastically changed the fabric of cinema. And the film industry has completely changed because of them. And I think it's really sad that basically there's only a handful of studios that are really pumping out independent cinema. And like, I love A24. I love Blumhouse, which then Blumhouse is owned by Universal at this point. So it's like, it's still a big studio. But like stuff like A24, which are so unabashedly just one creative force's vision. And no matter what film it is, you're going into something special. And not going to lie, there are a lot of big budget films that are shallow as a puddle. Like every single Transformers movie feel that way. And I think in general, it does upset me that so much of cinema is just rehashing things at this point, because we don't get a whole lot of originality anymore. And on some level, I guess it's our fault as film goers, because what do we reinforce? Well, I'm going to be a jerk here and speak for myself, and like, I see literally everything. So I do try to see everything. But in general, like, most film goers see comic book movies. They see Disney movies. They see big budgeted movies, which is why studios are going to be like, I can make 6 movies this year and make more money than I ever have. Gonna just be printing that money. And that's Disney. Yeah. That is one greedy mouse. He's just sitting there printing all kinds of money. And like, it makes me, with that and with the pandemic, it makes me worried about where cinema is actually going.
Sure.
But I guess my last thought is, before I let you guys jump in, is that it's all cinema to me. And it's just different kinds of films. So like, I'm okay with him saying some comic book movies are just made for fun, because they are.
Yeah.
But like, I'm not gonna lie, I've had more emotional reactions to some comic book movies than I have most other films.
Yeah.
God, Logan will get me every time.
Yeah.
But
Some of those characters, like Logan, I mean, we grew up with them. I mean, I was a kid when I was introduced to Wolverine. So I mean, you know, they of course they're going to strike that emotional chord. And you know, I agree with everything you guys are saying. I think that what you said, Shane, about kind of like we're our own worst enemy. People and the audience kind of has to look at themselves, say like, this is what we paid for, this is what we went, you know. So if people are gonna sit there, like I have friends like my friend Jansen, who I can think of, is probably the second time I brought him up on this on our podcast. He loves Wes Anderson, loves like indie films, you know. Anytime that he feels like a film is he loves the word panderous. He says that. I think what he would say if he was part of this conversation, a lot of other, you know, like indie film people would say, is that these big budget films are going to pander toward an audience. So the beats, the things that happen, how we're supposed to feel are kind of the argument's going to be that it's predetermined. And so what I'm going to say, so I like Wes Anderson. I don't love Wes Anderson.
yeah,
Some of his movies, I'm like, yeah. But I think that guys like Jansen, they don't even watch movies anymore. They don't even watch them. And I think that that's partially what happened. Some people are just not going to go to the movies anymore because it's the thing is, for them, it just doesn't work anymore, maybe. On the other side of that, because I do feel kind of in the middle here on this conversation, because I hate it when I'm watching a film and it feels like the director is afraid to make it cinematic. I feel like when a director, like he or she, is being so careful to make it real that it's almost mundane, you know. Ironically, Shane, we don't have to get into this, but I felt that way about Always, Sometimes,
Never,
Always.
rarely, sometimes, always.
Rarely, Sometimes, Always.
Yeah.
That's how I felt about that movie. I wanted like Richard Linklater to take over at one point, because I was like, can we get some fucking like, you know, let's get something like, can I laugh? You know, like, and I couldn't.
There's not a single laugh in that movie.
Yeah, there's no laugh, and that's okay. That's not the film they wanted to make. It wasn't it wasn't a Linklater movie. It wasn't a Rob Reiner movie. It was, you know, it was just this small little indie film. So I have a problem with films that are so afraid to feel like movies, and I also don't like movies to just be, I'll be back. You know, like I want a sort of a combat. It's an art. It's an art form, and I feel like there's room to throw everything into the pot and stew it up all around. And so I agree that you can't really put a finger on exactly. It's all cinema, and that there's so many people in the audience, and they're not in the movie theater anymore. They're at home on a computer screen, or they're watching it on their TV on demand on Netflix. The audience is so big and so diverse and so all over the place. So it is a different era, and there are going to be people like some of the people I talk about who are just going to dismiss the future and live in the 90s. You know, like I think I know a few people like that. So, yeah.
And it's interesting because, like, there are definitely films that pander. Case in point, you know, the Transformers movies are such great case studies for, like, the profitability of cinema, because how the hell do those movies make over $1 billion? Here's why. Transformers Age of Extinction, up in like the third act of the movie, goes to China and has the whole entire third act in China. Why? Because they want Chinese people to go out and see the movie. Yeah. And they did, because like, if I'm not mistaken, I think that film made $1 billion and like 75% of it was international. Because of that very reason. They were very particular about how they structured the film to incorporate that. And like, I've seen that in Marvel movies. I'm pretty sure, like, probably one of the films, like, and I've seen all the Marvel movies plenty of times. Like, I love the MCU. Age of Ultron feels like there's parts in that film that happen because they're trying to go for certain audiences. Mm-hmm. And honestly, that's one of the biggest, messiest of their films. And you can tell. And it's unfortunate because it messes up the film when you're just trying to do specific things like that. And why they, like, I was having a lot of fun with the most recent Power Rangers movie, but they had some of the most ridiculous Krispy Kreme product placement in it. I'm just like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, I can be okay with like the MacGuffin in the film was in the ground, just happened to be under a Krispy Kreme. Like, that could have been a funny one-off joke, but they kept going back to it. I'm like, how much money did Krispy Kreme have to pay like Saban films to like?
Oh, it was Krispy Kreme. I thought you were using Krispy Kreme as an adjective.
Nope. literally Krispy Kreme. They had Rita Repulsa eating a Krispy Kreme donut at one point. I'm just like, I gotta take over the world. Right after I eat this donut at Krispy. And I'm just like, and there's shit like that in movies, and I'm just like, why? But you know why? Because money. And honestly, that's why, like, as somebody that I don't, like, I watch so many different kinds of movies. I don't shun away from different genres. I watch all kinds of stuff. And obviously, there's certain times where I'm feeling this kind of movie. And sometimes I'm just feeling an A24 film because I want to see something that has no qualms about exactly what it is, and it's going to go for it. Because that's what you expect from A24 films, is because for better or worse, I don't think anybody's checking their creative process. Like the filmmakers making those films. Because if they were, Midsommar would never have happened. Like, that is just out there. But I loved it. I loved watching, just experiencing something that just took me away. And there's other times where, like, I want to watch Shrek because I want to laugh. I want to hear some really dirty, like, double entendres and just silly lampooning of fantasy and fairy tales. And sometimes it's just like, I can appreciate all kinds of different cinema from all around the world. And that's the coolest thing about movies. And I am legitimately concerned about where the future of cinema is, because it's not at a movie theater. For one, like, movie theaters are never going to be the same after this. And I don't think, and no matter how pissed off everybody is about it or how tone deaf Warner Brothers was in doing it, their plan to simultaneous release all of their films in 2021 in theaters and on HBO Max is the future, and taking big steps towards it. And as somebody with a master's in accounting, which I have a unique perspective, because like I see the business and I love the film, and I can see why they're doing it. Because like, if Warner Brothers is going to put all this money, and Warner Brothers is owned by AT&T, and AT&T loves streaming, because not only are you streaming things on their streaming service, they're using your data that you're selling them to stream it. So like AT&T is like, oh, here we go. And that's reality of it. It sucks. Because like, not gonna lie, I'd rather see any movie on a big screen. That's why and to you, Mr. Scorsese, I paid money and sat in a theater to watch The Irishman for 3.5 hours because that's how I wanted to see it. And I know Matt's not a huge fan of The Irishman, but like I could have waited until Netflix and watched it distracted by everything around me. But like I wanted to watch it in a theater. That's why I saw Marriage Story in a theater. I would have seen Dolomite in a theater if they had it around me, but that was also a Netflix, straight to Netflix film. I saw The Two Popes in a theater. Like I want to see movies in a theater. And I'm somebody that can appreciate that a lot and would rather do that. But the thing is, didn't stop me from watching so many things on streaming this year, because the thing is, it's like, if people didn't do that, movies wouldn't survive this to even have a chance in the future to go back to the cinema. Because here's the thing. Movies aren't going to get made unless there's people with money behind them to actually make them. Right. And that's a really tricky thing, because I feel like what Scorsese was talking about was kind of like a lighting of the fuse. And this fuse was really, really long, leading up to where is like what we know as cinema and the theater experience gonna go. And then COVID happened and made that fuse like a fifth the size, because like now it's way closer to what it's going to be. And I'm interested because I do wonder how many studios are going to be making $200 million movies when they don't get box office for them. Yeah. Because to be fair, I don't know how Netflix figures out how they make money off their movies. Like, how much did they pay for The Irishman? Like, that was like $150 million movie with all that CGI and everything. How the hell do they know if they actually made money off of it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's a really good question. You know, obviously everybody, like when you say a movie's on Netflix, it's like, oh really? Oh, I can watch it. Oh, that's good. I think they probably want everyone to be like, to be that person who's like already got Netflix. I remember I said to a friend of mine, I was like, yeah, I better mind my budget. I don't think I'm going to have Netflix for a few months. Like, oh wow, you're really cutting back. And not even Netflix. It's like, you don't even have mayonnaise in your fridge. Like, it was like, are those two things the same? You know, so I mean, you know, I want to say something, and Matt, I want to let you talk, because I could talk about this for days, but I do want to say something about being an artist as a musician, to go to argue on the other side of the Scorsese comment. And that's that when the people around you in a community are doing this thing, it inevitably is going to influence you. So in a lot of local scenes, local bands, from what I've seen, they seem to be very undefined. It's a lot of reverb. It's a lot of like Grateful Dead inspired jam music, which is cool to my ears for about 10 minutes. And then I'm like,
not my jam.
Can you write a song, please? You know? And I have friends who are like, what's wrong, bro? It does not, I'm digging it. Like, I'm on LSD. I'm having a good time. Well, I'm not on LSD. I want to hear, you know. So, but then you find yourself playing guitar in a band that does something like that, because it's the scene, it's the people, it's you know, all of a sudden now you're dating people who are into that, or now you're playing music with people who are into that, and now you can't help but it gets on you, and you can't help but become part of it. And then you try to express yourself as an artist within the scope of whatever that energy is and what that thing is. And so to argue on the other side of it, if you're a young filmmaker coming up and you're a Scorsese looking back at your 20-year-old self and go, well, I was coming up at this time, I don't know if I made, you know, Scorsese was either going to become a filmmaker or a preacher. Maybe he would have gone and become a preacher, because I don't think that Scorsese would have done Avengers. I don't think Scorsese would have made, you know, Logan, you know, who knows, because he just came from such a different era.
Yeah.
And now if you're a 22-year-old kid and you've got an eye and you've got a talent, and you don't have to be 22, you know, I'm 34. You mean, one of your favorite directors, Shane, became a director when he was like 55 or something like that. You know, so, you know, but, you know, you are going to be pulled into a world where, say, a Nicholas Winding Refn, it's amazing that he did Drive. And then he did Only God Forgives, and then he did Neon Demon. And those films weren't great, but they're memorable. What's he gonna do next? And is anyone gonna give a shit? You know, is the question. And if you have a 22-year-old like Nicholas Winding Refn, not one of my favorite directors, but he made one of my favorite films, like, is he even gonna do it? Is he just gonna go, well, why should I even do it? You know? I think that becomes the worry, and that becomes the fear, because that person's going to get into it, and there might be people around him saying, well, you should make car commercials, dude, because you can there's a lot of money in that. You know, I mean, I'm sitting in a cafe in Pomona, California with a lady who works with AEG, and she's like, you should be recording songs so you can sell them to the NBA, and so you could sell them to Honda, and you could. I'm like, but that's not. I'd rather get a job. I'd rather get a real job. Like, you know, so I think that that's the other end of the spectrum in the conversation, is that there may be a lot of people who don't feel like they have a path. You know, and so just what is like, oh my God, A24. I want to be a director. I want to direct with them if I'm a director. I want to direct with this guy. I want to direct with a Miramax, not with the asshole. Unfortunately, he was such a piece of shit in his personal life. But you want to direct with the Miramax of the 21st century.
And it's very interesting, because like, after everything that I said, honestly, there's some times where I'm just like example, Taika Waititi. I love Taika Waititi as a writer director. Like, What We Do in the Shadows, Hunt for the Wilder People, Jojo Rabbit, love those films. I also love Thor Ragnarok. And now Taika Waititi's going to be making Star Wars movies. He's making Thor Love and Thunder. And I'm probably going to love those films. Mm-hmm. But that also probably means I'm not going to see any more Hunt for the Wilder People. Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting trade-off. Because like, and the sad thing is, I think some directors do so well that big studios grab them and then ruin them. Like Taika Waititi, they let him still be him, because like Thor Ragnarok's weird and is very much still his kind of film. But like, look at Josh Trank. Did Chronicle. Chronicle's a really cool film. And then Fan Four Stick, that Fantastic Four movie.
Right.
But Fox messed him up though. Or I forget it was Fox, but he got messed up from them.
Yeah,
like,
but
I don't think he knew his voice. Yeah.
But like, some directors, I kind of just want them to keep doing doing their thing and not go and do, because like look at Jon Favreau. Jon Favreau knows how to make a great blockbuster. And like, I love The Jungle Book. I love Iron Man, love The Mandalorian, stuff like that. And he still has films like Chef that he could have passion projects like that. But like, he can do those different kinds of things. And there's plenty of directors out there like, look at Ron Howard. Like, Ron Howard is a studio filmmaker. You need film, go out there and be made. Ron Howard could do it and does a fine job doing it. And it's so very interesting because, like, obviously I don't know any of these people personally, so I don't want to speculate about their relationships, but think about the 70s. You had Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, Brian De Palma, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg. They all came up together.
Right.
Think about the trajectories they all had.
Oh yeah.
Like, for better, like, for unfortunately, Brian De Palma and Francis Ford Coppola really aren't relevant anymore in terms of the world of cinema.
Right.
But like, and it's interesting because who said it? I'm trying to think. I think it was Scorsese came out recently and said that it was Francis Ford Coppola, I think, said, I wish George Lucas didn't just make Star Wars movies. Because he had so much there to offer. And he just spent his whole entire career with Star Wars. But like, that was his thing. Star Wars was his creation. And no matter how much you want to say anything about the prequels, George Lucas gave us Star Wars. There wouldn't be any of this shit without George Lucas. So he created it. But you think about Scorsese and Spielberg.
Sure.
Scorsese always makes those dramas, whether some of them are a little bit genre-y, like gangster movies, like Goodfellas, Casino, The Irishman, stuff like that. They're still very human film, but like mob movies are like a genre, I guess you can say. But like, Steven Spielberg made Jaws and Indiana Jones and Jurassic Park. He made Jurassic Park and Schindler's List in the same year.
Yeah. And
what I really respect about Steven Spielberg is he's an amazing director and he has amazing vision. And like, he is an auteur director. He doesn't try to just do the same kinds of films. He does all kinds of different genres. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. Like, Ready Player One felt like a really just throwaway kind of effort, honestly. But like, he made Jurassic Park. He made Raiders of the Lost Ark. He made Jaws, some of the greatest genre films ever. And they're all amazing films. And they had stuff to say. Like, Jurassic Park has plenty to say, along with all of those terrifying scenes of like dinosaur violence. And it's so very interesting because like, they're two of the greatest filmmakers of all time, and they have taken two very different approaches to getting here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, he made 10, by the way. And that could be seen as like a theme park. And yeah. And then I guess to comment on your point about like directors, I guess, like getting corrupted. Like, I'm kind of curious though if Taika Waititi, like maybe he didn't have anything to say anymore in that vein of Wilder People. Like maybe it would be a bad thing if he would just kind of play his greatest hits all the time, where it's like, I'm quirky. Or maybe, and I feel like, so that would be kind of scary in a different way. And I also feel like because of Thor being, I guess I don't know how much it made, but on the internet anyway, people love that movie. And
like,
I feel like,
I think it made like $800 something million.
Okay, yeah. So someone definitely, like, people got paid after that. So like, when I think about that, I think a large reason why that movie probably made as much as it did is because of his interesting voice. And it's just something new out there. It's like getting thrown, and it's like, oh, okay, crap, this is refreshing. I was watching a Hollywood Reporter roundtable talking about like having directors, and two of the directors were the director of The Farewell and Greta Gerwig, and they were talking about kind of how like, well, things are changing, so maybe it's not necessarily that like we're in kind of like this idea drought. It's just now people saw and have loved and they've, I guess, experienced all the experience. Now they are kind of like hungry for something different. So now the old, I don't want to say like needs to move away, but like whatever was popular before, that needs to kind of give a little more room to people that want to say something different, or just people that kind of want to say the same thing, but their take on it. And I think that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, what did I put down there? I said things change, representation, and different definitions of how, like, what a movie and a film is. I think that is definitely different. You know what I mean? I think awards voters are changing. I think, didn't they like add like a bunch of more people to the Academy Award, I guess, yeah. I don't know, pool. And that's based on gender, and that's based on age and like other things. Like a lot more people are kind of like in positions of giving people like, yeah, like that's a good movie, and this is the reason why. Or I'm going to make my movie because I want people that think like me or look like me or like talk like I want other people to kind of like experience what is personal to me, which I would have at some points in time have never have seen on screen. So I think that's interesting. I think that that's also really cool. I think that when people talk about like movies, and I think when people talk about like, I'm a part of a certain kind of club and then everybody else is on the outside, I think that kind of like reinforces that thing, that underlying fear, which makes people say that in the first place, which is I really want other people to appreciate this thing as much as I do. Maybe like Star Wars, for example. Maybe the reason I'm so passionate, not me, but like, I don't know, a really like hardcore fan. Maybe the reason I'm so passionate about it, and the reason why I gatekeep so much, is not necessarily because like I want to be a jerk, even though there are jerks out there, but maybe it's because that like I want to preserve this thing that is so special and important to me. I get why Scorsese would say that Marvel movies are like theme park rides, or the Iñárritu, the director of Birdman, when he said that like Marvel like superhero movies are kind of like the death to intellectual film or intellectualism or something like that. Like I get why certain groups of people would want to keep movies and film or whatever like special and sacred, but I think that number one, there's a reason why those movies aren't always as accessible, right? And number two, you can have like really important messages inside of a big budget movie. Number three, kind of like I said before, just because a movie is extremely expensive doesn't mean that it doesn't have anything to say. Like, I guess it's interesting that people sometimes like on the internet or like people that are in the industry, whatever, like people will say certain things. And it's kind of like these giant blanket statements. I think that's kind of, I don't want to say dangerous because that's like super hyperbole. We're talking about movies, but like it's hard for me to swallow because it's kind of like, yeah, but I don't think I agree with that. Like, I think, what did I put down? I made like a list of like good comic book movies that maybe people don't like think about when they think about comic book movies, like Ghost World, with like that, all of that movie. That is a fantastic movie. Ghost World, The Crow, also a comic book movie, a superhero movie. That is an interesting movie. Actually, it's pretty dark, actually. If you watch Batman Returns, if you say Batman, I guess you might think of like, I don't know, like karate and explosions. Yeah, exactly. Like, but when you see like, what is it, Michelle Pfeiffer, and she like changes into Catwoman, Like, I don't care who you are. That is like, whoa, that is some interesting crap that I'm seeing on the screen. Any other random things I wanted to say? Fandom is scary, right? So even if like maybe not so much of a particular franchise, but just like film in general, like I hope people are more inviting instead of more like exclusive in terms of things, right? Because then like those people that you really want to stop giving so much money to Marvel movies, they are never going to be interested in that in a movie like Roma, right? If you say certain things like Scorsese is, like you can't say certain things that make people think, oh, well then I'm just not gonna watch your movie. Like I'm not gonna pay money to see like the cinematic effort from a filmmaker who thinks that my choice and taste is dumb, you know? So I think that's like important. And yeah, I don't know. I just think, and also your taste doesn't have to be, this is kind of like on as an aside, but like your taste doesn't have to be a contingent on what you don't need to be validated on what other people think is, like you can like what you like. Like I like Precious, Spider-Man 2, Kill Bill, Prisoner of Azkaban, like, I don't know, I like all those movies, and all those movies are extremely different, like incredibly different. But like I get something out of each one of those things, and each one of those things kind of are just like, I don't know, just like say something important to me that I honestly I don't need. The thing that I get out of when I see Precious or when I see Prisoner of Azkaban, I don't need anybody else to get that. I don't need Martin Scorsese to get that and then think, okay, good. Well, Martin liked it, you know, like.
That's really well said.
So, like, I don't know. I think maybe I like what you said, that maybe instead of like just a statement, some kind of like weird maxim, this thing where it's kind of like, I don't know, like we're in like this really weird situation right now, and kind of like, I don't know, like maybe he should have like asked a question, maybe he should have posed a question, or maybe he should be like mentoring other people and making it easier for newer like voices to come up, or maybe he might even should have like produced Joker, or maybe he should be like making movies that are maybe a bit more like accessible. Maybe not so much like the budget, but like what the movie's talking about. Well, I don't know.
I think that's a great last point. I want to touch on something you said about I'm pronouncing his name Inarritu.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that quote, the Scorsese quote, we live in this era where people are making blanket statements, and we need to, I think everyone is reacting so with emotion, you know, to a lot of blanket statements that are being put out there. It's happening in the political world, as you know, it's happening in the film world. And there also is, I think I'm sort of quoting Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan said something funny. He said, you know, why does everybody gotta like the shit that you like? Everybody likes different shit. Why do I have to like the same shit that you like? Just because I might watch a Fast and Furious. You don't have to like the Fast and Furious, you know. So I think there's a lot of truth in everything you're saying. But not only do we need people like Scorsese and Tarantino to kind of like mentor, you know, filmmakers, and not only do we need like A24 and brands like that to be able to say, here's this money, come in and make this film, make your film. We need stuff like that in the industry, but we also need to teach the audience to stop, and we just need to start like teaching one another not to be so emotionally, not to be so reactive, not to react to these things with such I think this might not be a word, vehemence, not to react with so much fervor without actually sitting in front of people and having a conversation about it. Because conversation creates empathy, but blanket statements they're just like stones being thrown at a glass house. Mm-hmm. And you know, I think we need the mentorship, but we need to teach people in general not to react so emotionally. You know?
I think humanity,
which is hard to do,
from that.
but it's important. Like,
Yeah.
Well, the technology itself, the medium of Twitter and Facebook and YouTube especially. Look at all the bullshit in the comments of YouTube videos. Shane, you're gonna get one in this one. Someone's gonna say something stupid in your comments, which is good because that means you've had more views on the video. Fingers crossed, someone says something stupid. You know,
Godfather sucks. Like,
my first ever video that blew up and got like hundreds of views was Call Me by Your Name.
Oh.
And people put like angry things because I used so in my description in the video, I put the word forbidden love to describe it.
Okay.
And that caused a very large reaction.
Yeah.
And people assumed I hated it because of that. And if you actually watch my video, I loved it. That movie made my top 10. I think it was an unbelievably beautiful film and really moving, which also Luca Guadagnino can make stuff like that in Suspiria. Same person. But anyway, like the point is, I don't want to give anything away in the film, but, and because people brought up, it's like Elio, like Timothy Chalamet's character and his family are very supportive. There's something there in the film. Something's not quite right with Armie Hammer then in that equation, because those who've seen the film know what happens at the end and what happens when he goes home. So like that caused a lot of fervor and a lot of people were angry. And like, I just posted a review for a new Bee Gees documentary. I love the Bee Gees and I love this film. And it was so interesting with how they dug into the fraternal nature of this group. And I've related very, very closely with Morris because he was like the monkey in the middle that had to deal with like his two brothers who are at odds with each other all the time. And I had people being like, I heard they don't go over the 80s and the 90s Bee Gees. What the hell? And I'm like, yeah, fair. They probably spent 5 minutes of the 2-hour film actually talking about them becoming big big songwriters for other people and into that period.
Right.
And then somebody was complaining, I heard they didn't spend any time between that disco era of the Bee Gees. I'm like, they literally spend half the film talking about like them going to Miami and stuff like that. And just the point is, people are so angry. And I'm like, just watch the movie.
Right.
And both those people commenting didn't watch it.
Sure. So now you're getting reactions to a reaction, you know.
Yeah.
And so and you don't know the person and you're not able to see them on a level playing field. I wanted to make another comment real quick. You're also, because of the way the media is and has been since before the Scorsese era, but even more so going into 80s and 90s, and now even more with social media. If Scorsese makes a comment about like that in the 80s about Schwarzenegger and Stallone films, it's probably not a big deal, you know. But is there any more depth there's probably less depth to some of those Schwarzenegger films in the 80s than there are to the Marvel. I would argue like Captain America is freaking awesome, you know. So you've got a filmmakers reacting to what is a mammoth thing happening in their industry, and they're reacting emotionally because they're just feeling what they feel. And I think that's my other thing. Is like that statement it's a statement. We don't have to steer the boat toward these statements when they get made, but unfortunately that's what people do. That's what social media does.
People will click on them.
Yeah, and it's clickbait and yeah. I'm not judging as much as I'm saying that's what's gonna happen, And I watch movies every week. I don't watch as many movies as Shane, but because you make it part of your craft to do it, and I respect that. But I watch movies, probably a little bit more like you, Matt, where I'll see a movie and then I'll go, oh shit, that really hit me here, and then I want to write a song about it, or I want to talk about. That's why I miss diners. It was my favorite thing to do, is go to a diner. The diner was an important part of the movie experience for me.
You go to the diner after you just talk it all out.
Yeah, exactly. It's like therapy at the diner.
I had emotional so like Friday nights through all this pandemic has been date night, and like Jess and I will order food in and we'll just watch a bunch of movies that came out, because Fridays are when movies come out. Yeah. And like yesterday we watched the season finale of The Mandalorian first, because like I somehow got through most of the day without any spoilers. So I'm like, but after that, like I watched Ma Rainey, Black Bottom, the new Netflix film with Viola Davis and Chadwick Boseman. And then we watched that new disaster movie, Greenland, with Gerard Butler, which I loved way more than I thought I was going to like.
My dad liked it. He told me, I was like, oh, I thought it was going to be like Angel Has Fallen. He's like, no, it wasn't like that.
No, it's a lot more serious, and it's not like, I wrote a review for Versus Pop, and I'm like, it's not like Armageddon. There's not hammy dialogue and Aerosmith in this movie. It takes a very different tone. But then the last one we watched was like, because Jess goes to bed at like 9:30, and I usually stay up a little bit longer. That's when I film and edit, stuff like that. But one last movie we watched was The Last Blockbuster. And it's a documentary about the last Blockbuster video that's in Bend, Oregon. It's still a thing.
Yeah.
And I got emotional watching that documentary because, one, I did live through, and like they showed these Blockbuster commercials, and I'm like, oh my God, I remember when they announced no more late fees. And I saw that commercial on TV where they're like, no more late fees, no more late fees. And then they drop down the front of the Blockbuster, says no more late fees. They're like, no more late fees? Yeah! Like, I remember all of that. But what really hit me was how emotional, like they had Kevin Smith on there, Jamie Kennedy, Sam Levine, all talking about going to the video rental store. Kevin Smith was like the best part of it. Like what he brought to it was fantastic. But I got emotional because movie like AMC is going to be Blockbuster. At some point it's going to be. And then it just started me thinking about AMC Hamilton closing. And then I had all those memories of all the time. Like, I have not gone to a theater more than AMC Hamilton in Hamilton, New Jersey. And now it's gone.
Yeah.
And I just had a rush of all these memories of like my brother posing with an Obi-Wan Kenobi and an Anakin Skywalker at Force Awakens premiere because Ethan was dressed head to toe as Kylo Ren. I remember like I always used to get my tickets beforehand on the app, and I'm like, oh, we're seeing The Lighthouse on a Friday night. Like nobody's going to be swarming out to see Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse. And then me be getting stuck in the front row and watching The Lighthouse there in the front row, and like sitting during Thor Ragnarok. And my friend John, the second he realized the voice of Surtur the Fire Demon was Clancy Brown, being like, oh my God, is that Clancy Brown? Like out loud in the whole entire theater where everyone can hear him. And just stuff like that. And that all hit me. And for somebody that, which I made this point in my review that I filmed, I'm like, honestly, you're not watching the last Blockbuster documentary if you don't love movies. Because why would you?
Yeah.
But like, imagine like I'm watching this documentary. Like, what if I wasn't a huge fan of music, but I love film, and I watched this Bee Gees documentary? It's interesting, but somebody like me who loves the Bee Gees, like I knew almost every song that came on during that documentary. It hits me in a different way. And like to go to the point of like what Matt, you brought up is like every film is going to be something special to someone. And that film being made was something special to someone. And I at least try in my videos, even if I don't like the film, to try to reason out who might enjoy this. And like at the end of most of my reviews, and like Alex, I know you've watched some of my, at least watched some of my reviews. It's like I try to be like if you love like the movie I watched this morning, Max Clouds. Like if you love video games and you just want a fun time, you're gonna really enjoy this movie. If you want something deeper than that, this probably isn't for you. But like I at least try to end things on that note most of the time, because it's like my brother loves the Fast and Furious movies. I really don't. Honestly, except for like The Rock and Jason Statham in them, which is why I loved Hobbs and Shaw. You know who loves Fast and Furious? Christopher Nolan.
Really?
He just came out this week and said, I love the Fast and Furious movies.
Yeah.
And I can see why. Because most of them are practical. Mm-hmm. Most of those stunts are practical. And then I can see a Christopher Nolan appreciating that about it.
So I remember really liking, not really liking it, but I remember having fun watching the first one. I always have fun watching the driving scenes in the movies. It's just everything. It's all about outside of that. It's not so great. But the action is great. Like the action is shot really, really well.
And it's all about family.
LOL.
Yes, I love family movies. Yes.
Could you? I hate that. I hate family.
Well, I do. I like family melodrama.
So I think with this interesting conversation we've had on the show this week, I think the biggest takeaway is every film means something different to everyone. And I think based off of everything that we said, that we can't just use blanketed statements to describe what cinema is, or like, I think it's really somebody out there is going to find something special in every film. And I think our world in general needs to be more respectful of other people and their perspectives. And one thing that Matt, you brought up that I want to just put forward is like, what's very interesting, we talked a lot about like a Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola. I brought up George Lucas, Steven Spielberg. They're all white dudes. And there's a lot of perspectives that haven't been shown in film. And I love personally getting to see films from other perspectives because I get to learn from them and see new cultures and learn more about certain people and how they feel and what they believe in. And I think that's something special. So any last minute thoughts from either of you two before we wrap things up this week?
Well, I thought the takeaway message for today was we should all boycott Scorsese movies. So go to your closet and then just throw away your Goodfellas DVDs. Everyone watching this.
I will be one of the first day be streaming, which that's probably where it's going to be coming out at this point, his next $200 million Western that he's supposed to be making. No matter where it is,
oh wow,
I'm going to see it.
Right.
So
Scorsese making a Western. Wow.
Yeah, it's crap. What the hell is it called? Like Killer Flower, like had something like Killer Flower in it. Gotta look it up. But like
got DiCaprio and De Niro, right?
Yes. And it's supposed to be like a $175-200 million budget. So he's trying to find financing for it.
That sounds like the theme park.
Matt's salty over here. Any last minute thoughts for you, Alex?
The only last minute thought I would have is that just everyone, we all love movies and we love cinema. Just remember, and I'm kind of taking this from the Brian De Palma doc that I saw a little while ago. Filmmakers fail, filmmakers succeed. And, you know, if you go out and you look at the filmography from a lot of these people in the movie industry, they had to get it wrong a bunch of times before they got it right. So I don't know much about the filmmaker who made Fan Four Stick, but he might end up making a great movie someday, you know, and that'll be like his black sheep where he learned like, okay, whoa, this shit wasn't for me, you know, with all the other things that go into it. But keep in mind that directors, it sounds like because of some of these places, they have a voice. They still have a place where they can express themselves. There's still ways for young filmmakers to go out and find ways to express themselves, but it's not always going to be a success. Sometimes you have to fail 3 times before you have a successful thing. And that's not something that we get taught in school. It's not something that our parents encourage us to go into. Show business is, you know, you got to fail before you're ready to put the lights on and say, you know, green light. You know, you gotta. So I'll end with that.
But I thought this was a very interesting conversation. I hope all of you out there thought it was too. So thank you all for tuning in to Alex, Matt, myself, and always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.
Bye, guys.